But first, we're going to take you back in time to the global conflict of World War II. The United States military was segregated, and even though African Americans served in the military, they had to battle segregation and prejudice just to actively participate in the war and fight as Americans.
Black people struggled to gain entrance into the Army, Air Corps.
Well, black folks has always struggled to be excellent. We felt if we were excellent, the larger society would give up segregation, which they did in 1948 and 1954. So therefore, we were encouraged that we were doing something that was changing the world. All black people wanted to do that at that time, and I hope that black people today will pick up the fact that they have to be smart, they have to go to school, and they have to be excellent in everything they do.
When I arrived in Tuskegee and saw these, first time I'd been close to an airplane, saw these young guys flying an airplane, I told the officer in charge, I said, that's what I want to be. I want to be a pilot. And he said, come in the audit room with me. Went in the audit room, he pulled my Rexus out. He said, you just a high school graduate. He said, those gentlemen you see flying the airplanes, all of them are college. And then he gave me a little history of the Tuskegee Airmen because I hadn't heard of it. He said, prior to World War II, they weren't allowing color to fly. And every time a Negro went to the airport trying to get up, they say, no, we're not taking the colored in. So he said, you know what changed it? I said, no, sir. He said, well, the NAACP, National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, and the black press and whatnot put a lot of pressure on the government because the United States government never told the people that they put 6 Negro colleges on the side. We had almost 1,000 pilots before the war, and they say, because it was an order came out in 1925 stated Negroes were dumb, they could never fly type aircraft, and a whole lot of negative things.
Actually, I came from a generation where aviation was just starting. Charles Lindbergh flew across the Atlantic, and that inspired me. James Doolittle and Roscoe Turner flew airline pilots, flew racing planes. Bessie Coleman was a pilot. But basically, I wanted to be a pilot because aviation requires excellence. And in our college, in our high school, we wanted to be excellent. And they said we couldn't do it, and because they said we couldn't do it, that's why we wanted to do it.
On the eve of the Second World War in April of 1939, the Public Law 18 was passed, calling for the expansion of the Air Corps. It called for the creation of training programs located at black colleges, which would prepare African Americans for service in a variety of areas in the Air Corps support services.
I was inducted into the Armed Forces in 1943, and for some reason they chose me to be trained for a supply and position. And I went to Camp Lee, Virginia, in Petersburg, and took a crash course in supplies. And after that, they sent me to the Tuskegee Airmen in Oscoda, Michigan.
Well, my duties were this. I belonged to the 366 Air Service Squadron, and we were a squadron of technicians, and we serviced the 332nd Fighter Group. We did everything for them. Supplies and heavy maintenance work like wing changes and engine changes and that sort of thing.
The training for an all-black flying unit took place at the Tuskegee Institute. Now, since most flight instructors of the day would not take black students, Charles Alfred Anderson taught himself to fly at the age of 22 in a used plane. He earned a private pilot's license in 1929 and a commercial pilot license in 1932.
In 1940, Anderson was hired by the Tuskegee Institute as its chief flight instructor. And at that time, Anderson was still the only black aviator in the United States who held a commercial pilot license.
Before 1940, African Americans were barred from flying for the United States military. Civil rights organizations and the black press exerted pressure that resulted in the formation of an all-African American pursuit squadron based in Tuskegee, Alabama in 1941. They became known as the Tuskegee Airmen.
First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt was very interested in the work at the Tuskegee Institute, particularly in the aeronautical school. In 1941, she visited Tuskegee Army Airfield and asked to take a flight with one of the Tuskegee pilots. Flight instructor Charles Anderson piloted Mrs. Roosevelt over the skies of Alabama. Mrs. Roosevelt marked the occasion with a photograph of herself and Mr. Anderson, which she promptly brought back to her husband, the President of the United States, and successfully urged FDR to utilize the 99th Squadron in combat missions.
The 99th Pursuit Squadron initiated in January of 1941 and became activated in May of 1942.
The 99th Fighter Squadron melded into the 332nd Fighter Group. The Tuskegee Airmen saw combat in Europe and North Africa, with nearly 3/4 of the soldiers as qualified pilots, while the remainder was trained as navigators or support personnel.
Due to the bravery, tenacity, and successes of the Tuskegee Airmen, President Harry Truman issued an executive order that desegregated the United States military back in 1948.
In March 2007, the Tuskegee Airmen received the White House acknowledgement with the Congressional Gold Medal in recognition of their service.
After 61 years, they found 300 of us alive out of the 13,000, and they called us to Washington, D.C., and gave us the Congressional Gold Medal of Honor. That was indeed a high feeling.
Well, yes, I went to Washington like most of the other fellows and received the commendation, and it was a wonderful, wonderful event. It's something that I will never forget, and I cherish my medal, Congressional Gold Medal.
Well, the Congressional Gold Medal was the highlight of the Tuskegee Airmen experience. Many people don't realize that in addition to the 1,000 pilots, there were 12,000 enlisted men and women, officers who were support personnel, mechanics, radio operators, communications, intelligence officers. So the medal was not just to me personally, it was to the entire Tuskegee Airmen organization. I had the privilege of receiving the medal from the President, Bush at that time, for the organization. And I pointed out that we did help to change society.
The Tuskegee Airmen continue to be honored at various events throughout the United States.
I was fortunate to be associated with a group of men that I just met by chance because we were assigned to the same unit. And many of them are lifelong friends. One of the Tuskegee Airmen here that is with us today, George Watson, I've known him for 68 years.